Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all-around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self-improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
Hi everyone, Mike Haltman. I am here again with our very special guest, Charo Ezdrin. Charo, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
You know what? No one's ever called it that before, but that's great.
It's exciting.
I actually got a question last time on my intro because in there it says I covered dating. And the guy was like, why are what's the deal with your dating? But it was actually two women, sisters, who started a dating website based on AI where it scans your face and connects you with people who are compatible just based on your personality from a face scan. But anyway.
Sounds like a great idea.
You know what? It was very interesting. It was very interesting. So, I do know you never really done this type of podcasting kind of a thing before, but you've been involved in many other things. You were on TV. What kind of TV stations have you been on?
I appeared on a show that was called lawnews.com, which covered high-profile cases. And many years ago, I was on, when I was very young, I was on a network television show called The Richard Bay Show, which was more of a funny skit thing, but it was fun.
You know what? Funny skit things are fun. I remember, what was his name? Not Monty Python, but something like that. But
right, something like that.
Yeah, that's great. You know what?
It was a bad version of Jerry Springer.
Ah, okay. You had armed guards who were there to throw unruly people off the set.
It wasn't that bad, but it definitely was a twist of that.
All right, that's fun. It
was fun.
So now you went to Hofstra Law and you won the Geraldine Ferraro Award for Courage and Grace.
Yes.
Tell me, what is that all about? What was the courage? What was the grace?
When I started my career after Hofstra Law, I was involved in the Nassau County government. I was lucky enough to be senior staff and director of government relations for Tom Suozzi, our U.S. congressman.
Yep.
And at one of the functions, I was awarded the Geraldine Ferraro Award for my hard work and my abilities to work with people and individuals.
It's great. You know what? It's always nice to be recognized.
It was a great honor. It really was.
Absolutely. And so working with Tom Suozzi, so I'm big into networking. I'm big into trying to make connections that can somehow be meaningful for both me and the person I'm connecting with. Did that role introduce you to people who, moving forward, have been valuable in your career?
The role itself, prior to working for Tom, I was prosecuting for the Nassau County Attorney's Office, and I was actually leaving to go into private practice, and I had met Tom and some of his staff members, and I made the announcement I was leaving, and he contacted me and he says, don't go anywhere. We want you to stay.
Wow.
And he gave me the role. And so I really stepped out of the legal field and stepped into government. And it taught me so much in those 6 years working as a liaison between Tom and the Nassau County Legislature. Not only did, the first thing Tom asked me was like, can you schmooze? I'm like, oh, I can schmooze. and you know what? It's really about personality.
Right.
And it just led me to so many different areas. And I really believed it shaped me and my career moving forward.
That's great. You know what? I follow politics pretty closely. I actually used to write a political blog, but
Oh,
I know it's very, it's very personal. It's connections, it's the friendships that you make. I guess on a level, it's almost like one hand washes the other, and both hands.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And the most important part of why I succeeded in my job was because I maintained relationships with both sides, Democrats and Republicans together. And for me, that was important. My
absolutely.
the the director of government relations who I replaced never really formed relationships with the Republican Party because Tom was Democrat,
Right.
and I had respect for them. They had respect for me, and we were able to work together. Listen, politics is politics, and you're never going to get on the same page. But at least we were able to do this in a respectful and human
That's
way.
that's something that's kind of been lost
Yeah,
in the recent years. But you look back at the Tip O'Neills of the world. I mean, things were, you have to, although now they don't, but you have to get along with the other side if you want to actually get things done.
anything done. Correct.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right. Well, so you went there after you were a prosecutor, and
Yep.
you prosecuted in family court.
In family court, yes.
So,
And I represented Children's Protective Services abuse and neglect cases.
so now that's got to be a very emotionally trying part of the court to work in.
It's a very trying part. I find it to be one of the most important courts
Absolutely.
that we have. I wish so. That may be a topic for another day. Um,
You mean the
I wish
goings on within family court?
not the going on in family court. It's how we choose or our elected judges. We may
Mm.
want to talk about that another day. I'm very strong about this because
Uh,
Nassau County, we don't elect judges. Even though they're on the ballot, they're not elected. They're chosen.
it's your turn, kind of
They're
deal.
chosen by the party leaders.
Right, right,
It's
right. I mean,
right,
I've talked to people who wanted to run for other types of offices as well, and it's based on the turn of who it is who's up
right.
and
And all
running.
our judges across the doors now. So the voters
Right.
aren't getting a chance to vote for whom they want. You go into the polling booth and it says choose three, but they're already chosen for you.
It's
So
interesting. My wife asked me about that. Why
right. So
why
why
is
even
it
have an election for
right,
judges? Just take them off the ballot and
right.
say they're appointed.
Yeah.
Appoint the judges. Stop making the outside world believe that this is a democratic process, that this is a democracy, and that the people are choosing to
Right.
choose who they want in on the bench and when they're
So
not.
so this doesn't have anything to do with your current practice, but why in the judgeships do both parties agree to get along?
I don't. I think it's not so much getting along. It's what one hand can do for the other.
Okay.
So I'll give you A, but you give me B, and we'll
The typical
it
quid pro quo.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. It wasn't always like this. There was, I think this just started about 8 years ago,
Really.
maybe 10 at most. I mean, you used to go and there used to be six names on the ballot and say choose three.
So you must know his last name is Dane.
The judge,
Ed
Ed
Dane.
Dane,
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
one of my favorite judges.
So he used to
Ed,
come. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, Ed, if you're watching this, Judge Dane, you know you're my favorite.
So so Ed used to we lived in Syosset, and he would come by the house because my wife was a registered independent, and I'm not a registered independent, but he would the nicest guy in the world, and I said, listen,
Nice.
you got my vote. Uh, whatever my political leanings are, you got my vote. Just a sweetheart of a guy.
When's the last time you remember a judicial candidate coming to your door asking for your vote?
No,
They don't because they don't
no.
have to.
Right. Right. Yeah, you do what you got to do, right?
They just have to raise enough money for their party. That's all they have to do.
I once went to a fundraiser down in East Rockaway, and the people there were all of the town workers because the town workers are beholden on the people in power for their jobs, and they have to donate to the party. It's all about fundraising.
100%.
Yep.
Listen, for the years that I was in government, I've walked many door to doors. I even went up to Albany. I You have to do what you have to do.
You
There's a
really do.
price to pay to be in government.
Yeah, definitely. But so back to you. So
Okay, good.
let's get back to what really matters. So you left you in 2010. You
Me.
started, of course. So you started your own practice in 2010, and you
Yes,
focused on. So you were doing criminal law as well as
I'm doing criminal.
matrimonial and family.
That's correct. Coming out of, I did enjoy my time when I was practicing in the family courts. And when I was in law school, I also interned for a matrimonial law firm. So I took a liking to that specialty. And when I opened up my own law practice, I focused mainly on matrimonial and family and criminal. Because criminal, there's always an aspect in the family and the matrimonial.
Yeah. So now,
Unfortunately, but there
so
is.
both of those away from criminal, matrimonial and family, are both can be disturbing in various ways. And are they symbiotic kind of? Are they somewhat the same, only different ages and different
It,
details?
it it's very similar. Matrimonial, if you had to take the piece out for each sector, because matrimonial is done in Supreme Court, and family court really only deals with support, custody, and family offense petitions, which you can deal with also in the Supreme Court. But if you're not married, you're in family court. If you
Right.
want custody, support, visitation, any of that good stuff. If you're married and there's equitable distribution or any finances that you have to deal with and it's contested, you have to be in the Supreme Court. That's jurisdictional.
So now in family court, because I know, every time I take the Long Island Railroad into the city, I pass the Queens Family Court right across from the train station,
Yep.
and I wonder, I sit there and I do this sometimes. I think about, what stories are going on in there.
Oh,
What tragedy. I mean, no one's in family court for anything good or happy. You know, it's got to be, sometimes I used to visit a friend of mine in the at Sloan Kettering, and I'd go through the children's area, and it's like dealing with that kind of misery all day, whether as an attorney, as a judge. It's got to be, have you taken? I'm sure you have taken cases home with you.
um, yes, I have. I've taken cases home with me. But early in my career, when I was interning, a very brilliant attorney, his name was Jerry Winter, and I interned for him when I was in law school, said, it's not your client, it's the client. And if you start making it your client and personalizing it, you will never make it in this field. And it is truth. I mean, you can, listen, I deal with the rawest emotions that anyone could
Oh
possibly
yeah.
have. And people are not always thinking logically. I always try to tell my clients we have to deal with this like as if it's a professional business meeting. I said, because if you're putting your emotions into it, we're not going to be able to settle. And we're just going to go around in a circle because there's always one person who wanted this more than the other.
Well, now you're talking matrimonial, and I know, sometimes because I've been networking, and you hear the stories of matrimonial attorneys, which, by the way, are typically pretty fascinating. But where the emotions do get in the way, where the hatred, where you spend 50 grand in legal fees over a $25,000 IRA, and
A
it
100%. Because
so
it becomes principle, but the
Right.
same, it still applies to the family court too. The problem with the parties on both sides, family court, whether married or not, Supreme Court, the problem is, unfortunately, parents, especially when dealing with children, can become very selfish. And they can't get out of their own head, and they don't realize the situation they're putting their children into. And there's a saying that we always say: learn to love your children more than you hate each other.
That's great. You know what?
Because, right.
I'm watching my brother-in-law who's 60 something still fighting. They have four kids and it's horrible. You know, the wife is bad-mouthing the husband to the kids and you know, you do the wrong thing, but you
Right.
know, listen, emotions are hard to control,
You're bad mouthing someone who's 50% of that person.
right?
You might as well be bad mouthing your own child
Right?
if you're bad mouthing their father. Listen, we all see it. We see it in our own personal lives. I mean, unfortunately, you wish everyone felt and knew what you know or experienced, and just for my career. But if I can go out there and teach everybody how to divorce properly, I would. Oh, by the way, today is National Ex-Spouse Day. Did you know that?
I did not. So what are you supposed to do?
Well, I personally have called both my spouses,
Okay.
my ex-spouses, and I called both my ex-spouses and wished them a happy National Ex-Spouse Day,
Wow.
because I have a wonderful relationship with both of them.
That's
And even
fantastic.
my husband today has a wonderful relationship with my ex-spouses.
That's fantastic. You know, they do say sometimes that people love each other, they just can't live together.
Absolutely. Listen, could have been a terrible relationship, yes. But for the sake of my children, I chose not to be angry,
Good for
not
you.
to hold resentment. And you know what? We can all spend Father's Day together. We can spend
Wow.
holidays together. And
Wow.
my two daughters grew up very confident because they had a family who
Right.
was not criticizing and demeaning each other all the time.
You know what? I wish I had had that family growing up. But yeah, that's fantastic. So now, my wife worked at the Safe Center answering phones. And one of the things that, you know, became clear to her, you look at cities where, or towns where people are more affluent, you look at cities and towns where people are not affluent. And what she learned was that it doesn't matter. It just transcends economics. Child abuse, divorce, well, in this case it's spousal abuse, physical abuse, you know, it transcends it transcends where you are in life. It's just a constant.
It sure is. And it's sad. It's very, very sad. I wish I could say I have all the confidence in the world of our court system. It's not all, it's flawed, just like everything else. Um, Obviously, all the systems in place, but you know what? There's good attorneys out there. There are good judges out there. And
So do you have to luck out?
in order to make sure it's
Well,
not,
to get a good judge, you know,
yes, you have to luck out.
and
There's
even
definitely,
and an attorney, you need someone who you trust to make a referral. I mean, you can't pick an attorney necessarily off the internet.
well, some people, finances is a problem for people.
Right.
So they, I mean, obviously the wealthier side, or, the more, white collar, they'll get whom they deem as the best attorney there is for their money. And a lot of times they'll get better results than the person who's going to go to court and get into a court appointed attorney, although some court appointed attorneys are
Right.
very, very good.
Right. You know what? At the end of the day, whether it's in real estate, criminal, matrimonial, you need people who give a shit, who break a sweat, who actually care. You know, if you,
But
yeah,
that you just hit the nail on the head. It's having
Absolutely.
an attorney who actually gives a shit and cares.
Right. Not just mailing it in for the fee.
No, and trust me, I see that in my practice, especially when people are fed up with their attorneys and they come here and they're like, "We owe our attorney $50,000, $100,000." I don't think I've ever had a case that went to 100,000, even a matrimonial.
Really.
I mean, because you know what, because I'll never get rich being an attorney because
Right.
I care too much. I care. But you know what? I'm very successful. So I'll take the success and the volume of my business over, you know, being, I'm able to put my head down on a pillow at night and go to sleep.
I always tell my kids that at the end of the day, when you're meeting your maker and you're being eulogized at your funeral, how much money you make really doesn't matter. It's
No,
what you've given back, what you've done for people, have you been a good person is really it. And you can put your head down and sleep at night because you're doing the right thing. And
and
that,
my life has, I wouldn't change a thing in my life the way I've done anything. I just would never change a thing because you know what? I know I've done the right thing throughout my life. So, and you know what? The right thing has come back to me. So, and I have such a wonderful life that I can just sit here and say that I must have done it right.
that's fantastic. You know what? My wife's a big believer in karma.
So am I.
There you go. Listen, you can do a lot of dickish things, but eventually it's
I
going to
like
catch
that.
up to you, I
I
think.
like that.
I think. So now, how did you meet up with your two partners?
So in 2000, we were just talking about this because we just had an office dinner. We hire interns from Hofstra. I have externs from Hofstra. I think we might have had a St. John's and a Toro also. So we're growing as a family. We just went out to dinner. We invite, past, present, and future, all the externs and interns, and we were just talking about this in 2000, and I want to say it was like 2014. I was a solo practitioner. I was law offices of Charo Ezdrin, and I had a paralegal who was working with me, and she just quit one day. And I was so busy, and I put an ad real quick. I think it was Craigslist back then,
Mm,
Craigslist and Indeed, and I had people coming in. I'm trying to make copies, and Brian Woods came in, and he was from Texas, and he came in, and he was very polite, and he was working in a restaurant, waiting to take the bar exam, or waiting for the bar exam results because he was, wanted to be admitted attorney, and I looked at him, and he was the best one out of the whole lot that came in, and I looked at him and I said, "You want to start right now?" And
nice.
he said, "Yes, I would." And that grew. And in 2016, we moved into Syosset. I had moved out east. There was an opportunity for a new space in Syosset, and I asked him if he wanted to be partner, and he bought into my firm. And years later, I was fortunate enough to have Sam Gluzberg come by, and he too, eventually, after a year and a half, 2 years, I made him into a partner,
And the rest is history.
and the rest is history.
So now they both cover family and matrimonial as well, correct?
They do. Sam is on the panel. He's on every panel in Nassau County Family Court. He's on
Wow.
18B and the Law Guardian panel. And I have to tell you, if anybody is listening to this,
I hope somebody does.
I hope so. You're missing all the good stuff. We're going to talk better later. But they raised their prices. The state finally is now paying double of what, almost double. I believe it was 75. It's not double. Yeah, it's double. Now it's like 150. Don't quote me on this. It's like $158 an hour.
Okay.
But you go in and you impress, and the judges like you, and you work every day in the courts, and you put in, just like my partner, Samuel Gluzberg, hardest, most determined. I say he's a mini me because he works so hard. He's doing phenomenal.
That's
I
great.
mean, doing better than a privately retained attorney
So
on the
now,
panel.
so he's on the panel, and that introduces him to judges, not necessarily through your practice, but now when he goes before them through your practice, it
Right.
helps, the
Yes.
relationship helps.
He has built his own relationships as well through that.
Right.
Um, yeah, he's just doing, I call, like I say, I call him my little mini me, because
It's great.
he has that determination
You
that
know what?
every lawyer needs when they're young.
It's not easy to find a partner you can even work with, let alone partners who are like you and who like you. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, when I started the title company, I had an attorney partner who I had to get rid of because he brought nothing to the table. But when you have people you bring in who really
Right.
fit your needs, that's phenomenal. That's great.
Yeah. Yep.
That's
And we're
fantastic.
trying to get Brian Woods now on the Suffolk County panel.
Nice.
So that works.
Now, how is that a political kind of effort?
No, you just have to fill out an application. You need trial experience, which he has, and you have to watch a couple of videos and you get on the panel. What you do with it once you're on it is
Is
up
up
to
to
you.
you. Right.
You can be the law guardian of the day in the court. I'm not sure how Suffolk County runs it, or on the 18B panel. They call it AFC, Attorney for Child. AFC of the day, and you can always make sure you're present in court, so the judges say, "Oh, wait, there's Brian Woods. Let's appoint him on this case," because the
How
court is.
much time and effort does that take? As much as
I think it's the video part probably is the most, watching the videos, but the application is probably a nothing to nothing to do to put in.
great.
And then you would have to go, but it could take about 8 months. By the time they call you, review your application and everything else.
Yeah, but worth the effort.
Worth it. Yep.
Absolutely. So you were at one point president of a group I just joined, the Syosset Chamber of Commerce, and
Yes,
you brought great things there.
I did. It's a great chamber. Um, when when I first joined, it really was a non-existent chamber.
Hmm.
Very small, and great people. Same people that are still in it now, very devoted to the chamber, and I ran for president shortly thereafter of joining in 2016 and 2007. That was May 2017. I became the president,
Fantastic.
and with the help of the other members, we just turned. I used my office as the chamber's office, and I had my staff work on building a website and hiring people and making this into, or starting to make it is what it is today. So I might have started that, but now you have Russell Green, Maureen Nichols. She was the president after I was, and now Russell has been, I think, God, going on 5 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
So between myself, Maureen, and Russell, and its members, and the executive board especially, it's turned into a really flourishing, wonderful chamber.
listen, I've only been in it a few months, but I've been very much impressed. And I
Yes,
know
it should be.
what I tell my kids is that when you join an organization, you should aspire to a position of leadership.
A
That's
hundred percent.
that's very important, and you were the ultimate of leadership. So congratulations on that.
Thank
And so we're running out of time, but I have a question for you. You're a, director of NIFA, the Nassau. Fill me in.
you. It's the Nassau Interim Finance Authority.
Right. So now, what's your role there?
I am an executive director. I'm on the board. We are the oversight for Nassau County's fiscal environment. NIFA was put in place I want to say back in like 2000 and well over 20 years ago. I don't know the exact date because Nassau was going bankrupt.
Right.
And I think it was after the Thomas Galata days. That's going back a long time.
Yeah.
And by the way, just as a little side note, I am the only woman on the board and the first woman to be appointed to the board ever.
So it's an appointment.
It's an appointment by Governor Hochul.
That's very impressive. Now, how did she know of you?
I would hope everyone knows of me.
Well, of course. No.
I was probably recommended by Jay Jacobs and some of the members of Nassau County.
That's fantastic. Now, what will it take for Nassau County to be released from financial oversight, or is it a permanent thing?
It's not permanent. If they can show a healthy financial forecast, not just in this. It's like right now, Bruce Blakeman will say we have a surplus of $450 million, but it's a lot of one shots.
Of course.
So NIFA has a whole staff. We have the staff that looks at, these numbers and says, wait, the forecast for next year, they keep going this way. It's not looking good for next year or the year after, because they can just go bankrupt like that.
So back in 1984, when I got out of business school, I was a municipal bond analyst at a firm, Shearson Lehman Brothers, which a lot of people have never heard of, but it was about analyzing the financials of cities or any other municipally backed entity, and really trying to figure out what revenues are right and what revenues are just one-time shot bullshit. And that's where ratings come from. What is Nassau rated now? Do you know?
I think that they were rated pretty high. I don't want to say what it is, but I don't.
Okay, I'll find it and I'll let you know. But
I can find out at my next NIFA meeting.
There you go. So the last thing, ironically, recently I had on my podcast Rory Lantzman, who's with the Brandeis Association, and Rory and I spoke about anti-Semitism on campus and other issues facing society today, but mostly anti-Semitism. And he's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting Rory within this past year when he joined NIFA.
Okay, yeah.
And he came to my office and he explained to me everything he does, and he's just a wonderful, well-rounded individual.
Absolutely, doing important work.
Absolutely, very important work.
But Charo, you're a pleasure.
So are you. Thank you so much.
Oh, please. No, hey, listen, the pleasure is all mine. I hope to see you at a Syosset Chamber meeting, but if not, I'll stop by your office and say hello in person.
Open invitation. Invitation.
I appreciate that. And I'd also love to, we didn't really touch on everything I wanted to talk about, so maybe some point in the future you'll come back.
Absolutely. Anytime. You just let me know.
All right.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Hold on one second.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop us a review. We'll be back soon with more insights, experts, and conversations that make you think. See you next time. Do you ever wonder where curiosity meets conversation?